Hello, dear friends. Today, we continue to get acquainted with the diary of Gerhard Linke, a German lieutenant of the 185th Infantry Regiment of the 87th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht. Please watch the first video if you missed it for a complete overview of the events. Remember to rate this work and also tell us what you think about this story. Let's begin. December 29th. I saw once again the difficulties people face while building a position. It is impossible to dig into the frozen, hard-as-a-bone ground. Those poor sappers are almost in despair. A strong swing of the shovel and there is no more earth blowing up into the air than dirt from under your fingernails. All of this is familiar to us, and the more unclear that why, in the autumn, in the slush, a break was not requested. Since at first there was no worthy enemy around, it was all the better to get ready for the winter. It was clear that the lagging transport would not have time to get the uniforms for the further march. What about the lack of winter clothing? The number of troops made us think of something even then. The march to the east demonstrated that authoritative statements about the power of the Red Army were deceptive. The Red Workers' paradise was only heavy mortars and tanks and nothing else. There was not even enough food for the poor population. The Red commanders hope in vain. All their hopes are an illusion. They will not achieve great victory. Our mistakes are their fleeting success. Undoubtedly, the Bolsheviks will face our might in the summer. The Kremlin leaders will see the value of their hastily assembled brigades. The other day, the news from North Africa was not good. The British have evidently drawn up their forces and are taking the offensive. The East has picked up some of the troops originally planned to be in Libya. I am thinking, for example, of the 5th Armored Division. All our hopes are with Rommel. December 30th. Crowds of people who have left the village go back in search of food. But we have to be ruthless. We cannot waste small supplies. We persecute people with threats, and let hunger do what lead could not do. December 31st, evening of the old year. However, the end of the year did end up bringing joy to the regiment. At the station in Mozhaisk, I met a new replenishment. 2 non-commissioned officers and 104 soldiers. What was especially valuable was that these men were experienced soldiers going back. They recovered and returned. A lot of them are from the same regiment. They were wounded in the first summer battles. The difference between these soldiers and the soldiers who so-and-so found arrived from the supply wagon in Colossal. In the warm room, the Christmas tree is lit with candles for the last time. Again, the sky is clear and starry. It is very cold. We sit with the officers of the regiment. We drink tea with rum. We are talking about worrying things, listening to the radio. Replenishment led to a conversation about reserve forces. The difference between reserve and active units appears to be getting more and more noticeable. A short characterization is enough to consolidate the former view of the reserve battalions. If only a fresh wind would get in here and blow away the ambition to get into Feldfebels and senior riflemen. It would only take a few young officers and non-commissioned officers from the battlefront to send there, and the replenishment would be different. Of course, the way soldiers are trained also needs to be reviewed. Open order, which has been practiced for the 100th time, should be changed to firefighting or hand-to-hand combat. Observation and striking exercises should be replaced by shooting from knee or shooting from the seat. The gentlemen officers in charge of training the soldiers should not rack their brains about whether they will hang out tonight at the Palace Café or at the New World. The education of the men in their charge, that is their main effort. Commanders must constantly hear from them requesting to be transferred to the parade ground to get some frontline experience there. Training in barracks cannot be taken seriously. Nothing but relentless hard drilling in units in peacetime will make the reserves really useful. With a glass of sect and the hope of future success, I greet the new year. January 1st, 1942. New Year's Day, -32 degrees. The past year, if I dive into my memories, has brought many new experiences and impressions. Everything would take several more years to fully make sense of it all. I have to separate the chaff from the wheat, and my mindset, in many ways, will be transformed as I look at the events from a different angle. Still, I think the experience and the maturity I have gained over the year will help me in the future. The year started with a parting with the girl I love. In France, in the regiment, in the border garrison, the best memories remain. My memories of the productive period of my training, of the beauty of the landscapes of Fertile, where spring soon began, of Tarusa and Muncherchard. What I recall willingly are the cozy evenings in the clubroom with the deep armchairs, with a glass of sparkling sect, or bottles with the well-known labels and inscriptions, Martel, Hennessy, Montmuso. In front of me, I see Mr. Peters' Escadorador establishment, which is full of coziness. There is a bank of empty bottles on the table and a mountain of franc tickets. The nightly raid on Quissy Castle and the ringing bells of Montchaussard make life filled with longing. In the misty haze rises the heavy kilometer-long Montchaussard block that we had wanted to climb for a long time. The appointment of an officer was the fulfillment of a goal I had set from my youth. Then the bright event was a visit to Paris, awakened to a new life. I saw its splendor. Next, the train started rattling in quiet Fertile, and now I was on the train that headed east. We, officers of a company of bicycle in formation, were hospitably met by Grunfeld. Another spring. East Prussia's beauty captivated me. We all prepared with enthusiasm for the march to the southeast, but expectations did not materialize. We moved on to the Russian border. On the morning of June 22, 1941, the regiment found itself on the front lines. At 3:05, the first grenades of our unit were fired across the border. 10 minutes later, the infantry attacked numerous border fortifications, the location of which I helped the reconnaissance staff to determine. At Bogensach, my platoon had its first battle. My old good friend, Lieutenant Buttringer, a brave and courageous man, died while I was at Ruza. A lot of losses were suffered while we seized the fortress of Osowetz. The curses were hanging in the air, the deep sands stretching for kilometers, every minute ready to swallow you up. The burning June sun and the thick, all-penetrating dust are forever associated with the name of that fortress in my mind. After the first battles, in which we participated as far as the Bialystok area, I stayed for a rest in Cider, where I received the Iron Cross II degree. A period of continuous movement and redeployment to the rear followed. It seemed boring and tiring in those days. Now the memories of the carefree days in the former Polish regions and the varied dishes of local food only make me happy. My brother Hans died as a hero then. I read about it in the notice. Again, we have to go into battle. It was a long railroad ride to Smolensk. I will never forget the cruelest defensive battles, heavy losses on both sides. In September, I was in Dukovshchina, in the reserve of the command staff. By the beginning of the big October offensive, the High Command sent me to the regimental headquarters. The inspiring, splendidly conducted offensive made my regiment famous. October 13, Shipana and Popovka, the hardest days for me remained unforgettable. The big encirclement, which we participated in, will become part of history under the name Battle of Bryansk and Vyazma. There was nothing to stop us. We were rapidly overcoming minefields and blown-up bridges. I was awarded the Iron Cross, first degree, by my commander on October 18th. It was now a muddy season from which it was difficult to escape. During this time, I learned how to ride a horse. Especially memorable to me was the Kashchevka Stadium that was sunk in the mud. Then we crossed Borodino Field, where Napoleon had his battle, which is still reminded to this day by the numerous obelisks of monuments. We crossed the Moskva River through a ford, then made the march to the village of Vishenki, reflecting the enemy's attack, the first acquaintance with the Siberian divisions. The eventful attack on Moscow, which I described in the first pages of this diary, begins. Needs and inhuman tension. That is how one can describe the year 1941. More than once we almost touched the hands of bone death. Here I stand before the open door, through which I must pass into the unknown. But I have enough courage. I will cross the threshold. It is my conviction that the year is going to be as exhausting as the battlefields of 1941. Indeed, I am confident that the new year will bring us to victory. That is why I want to characterize it in the words of the poem, "You must believe and be bold," because the gods never make promises to us. January 2nd, the temperature is negative 33 degrees to negative 37 degrees. The frost stiffens the limbs. I got myself a Valenki. Feet are incredibly warm. There are more and more Valenki in our unit. Unfortunately, so far below the need. The most severe torment of the frost seems to be over, as the soldiers in the warmed dugouts do not suffer from cold so much. The sentries received fur coats, giving them good protection from the cold. Fortunately, the frostbitten men are getting well. Just a few days ago, they started gathering warm clothes in the homeland. It turned out really comical when the Reich minister called for warm clothes. A cinema newsreel was already showing the fur coat distribution, and the radio announced that the soldiers of the Eastern Front were dressed perfectly. It was a play worthy of regret. It could certainly not have been bad if we ourselves had not been the victims in it. The warm clothes don't seem to arrive in the East until Easter at the earliest. January 3rd. The temperature was negative 28 degrees. We have been preparing for a new march for several days now. The overall situation points to its necessity. By doing so, everything that has been done so far is destroyed. The most terrible thing is, of course, the cold. It gives one the feeling of a new strength. Surely our position is improving in terms of positioning, but the question is, will this advantage have its disadvantages? January 4th, Sunday. It is only negative 19 degrees in temperature. When I get outside, it makes me wish it could be spring as soon as possible. The report from a few days ago was about the battles at the Central Front and in the Crimea. We have no reserves, so any sudden local offensive may have severe consequences. The leadership made a serious mistake. The men in charge have a series of layoffs, and our general, the master of quotes, must also lose his leadership over the Corps. But this does not make up for the lost preparation. Mistakes are not corrected in the results. The question we ask ourselves is what will happen if the enemy launches an attack? What's bad is that the tank specialists are used in unfamiliar hand-to-hand combat. If then the tanks are brought up, there won't be people who can service them. Without a rotation in the near future, our beaten, exhausted divisions will not be enough to fight during the summer. Morale and discipline point to phenomena that were previously foreign to the regiment. At the same time, I have found that in other units such behavior is even more severe than in ours. From a careless attitude toward the keeping of military property to stealing from each other, the word friendship is now written with a small letter. Grief to see that there is no longer a collective inspired by the spirit of struggle and the will to resist. Many old officers who fought in the World War claim in unison that the spirit of the troops was much better then, and there was no such lack of discipline in 1918. This is something to think about. We might look for a reason for this in the fact that most short-term soldiers who are under the pressure of the bad years of 1918 through 1933, and to whom the concepts of duty and soldier's honor is not yet in their blood and flesh. Sadly, many do not act decidedly where it is needed. Yesterday, we celebrated the joyful news of the appointment of the regimental commander to the post of colonel with a cup of tea and rum. January 5th. Snow month begins with light frosts. In January, heavy snowfalls should begin, covering roofs with snow as deep as a meter in thickness. The sky is covered with gray clouds. You cannot see the moon, or it would give light to the snow-covered ground, and it would make for a bright night. Is there a sufficient political ground for an attack on Moscow launched at such a late time of year? It is our assumption that Japan will be able to fight intensively against England and the United States, thanks exactly to the redeployment of powerful Russian forces from Vladivostok to the threatened capital of the Bolsheviks. Those first great successes of the brave Japanese are also our successes. At last, it was our entering into the war that made it possible to end the shipment of military equipment from America. Japan, with its fleet, its diverting British and American naval forces from the Atlantic, American aid to England is in crisis. January 6th. I was at the dressing station of one battalion today. Something terrible I saw. Many people had abscesses all over their bodies, the result of lice bites and scratching with dirty fingers. Their underclothes were horribly dirty and could no longer be used. Such effects are unavoidable with the enormous load of the station. It had not been possible to change underwear for months. Dirty underwear had been lying in the knapsack since the summer. It is impossible to wash them. Just water and soap are not enough. There has to be enough time to dry them. One soldier's calf was mutilated with open wounds the size of a 10-penny coin. Long johns lay right on top of the wound and chafed. Under these conditions, this sick man remains in the ranks. January 11th, Sunday. Temperature, negative 19 degrees. These past few days have been, I would say, uneventful. At the front lines, there is nothing new. Sometimes, in some sections, heavy mortars barrage fire hits our positions simply to remind us that Ivan is still here. Outside the 2nd Battalion area, single Russian snipers moved forward and tried to exhaust our forces. The news we received yesterday was disappointing, that Captain Mueller was wounded while making a round of the position. The doctor's report made us worried. A penetrating wound in the shoulder, entry wound on the right, exit wound under the left scapula. We received a new report from the main dressing station in the evening. Former adjutant of the regiment commander, who was called Cherta by everyone for his tall height, died from his wound. All of us are shocked. The life of a warrior with great expectations ended with Mueller's death. Relative to the general situation, we know a little. Urzhev and Kaluga have become the scene of violent battles. Seems that the Bolsheviks succeeded in building on the local breakthrough results. The Reds are trying every effort to use the winter, pushing units of Skiers forward. They are trying to get into badly defended areas and cause confusion in the back of our troops. Our defenses are being built in Vetulino. There is no retreat for the 185th Infantry Regiment. Stay or die. Nothing can come in a third in this Russian winter. But if the village gets in flames, this flaming column in fulfillment of the Führer's order will show the pilots and our neighbors that the German soldiers were fighting here to the last bullet. Even now, we do not know whether we will stay here or keep moving forward. Strong wind the day before yesterday and yesterday blew all the roads. One shovel is now worth a rifle. We are building shields of fallen fir trees. All efforts are thrown into this job of keeping the roads in transportable condition. Before the last week, I could look at myself as a lucky man. I certainly had no lice. The reason I speak in the past tense is because I, as well, am now busy trying to keep this critter within close limits. For now, I've succeeded. I often hunt in vain. Every day my catch is 2 or 3 of them, while most soldiers, regardless of their rank, count these tormentors in fantastic numbers, by the hundreds. I cannot say that I was jealous of their luck. Another recently recovered officer went back to the regiment from the reserve unit. To us frontline officers, the manners in the rear barracks drive us crazy. Here we stand at our posts. There, they cling to their units. January 14th. Temperature, -21 degrees. We still do not know the course of further events. Whether we stay or keep moving, no one tells us. What we lack is clarity and a decision. This is a difficult situation for us. Questioning yesterday, questioning today, questioning tomorrow. Yesterday is one order, today is another order. Old orders are soon replaced by new orders. Put the potatoes down, take the potatoes away. At -30.5 degrees, that's yesterday's temperature, you can't take position lines away from settlements, which means no possibility of getting warm. The commanders do not have this understanding. It was like the peaceful time in the village of Vetulino was over as well. Recently, 12:50 p.m., heavy artillery has started firing near the eastern edge of the village. Radio is reporting that last week there was a whole series of Iron Crosses awarding. At last, apparently, the heroes have been honored by the army. Through shifts in the leadership of the troops, I hope that outstanding men in the army, as it was in the Air Force, will get their fair share of attention. Lieutenant Wetzel returns from the infirmary after being lightly wounded. He was wounded at Polizzi. He tells in detail about the terrible way to the rear, the drunkenness and lack of discipline there. You have to fight to get back to your unit, since the wounded are almost always sent home to the infirmaries, and from there, when they recover, to the reserve troops instead of back to their own unit. Of course, people would prefer treatment in a field hospital, let it not be the best, but just to stay among their people. An iron broom is exactly the thing we all dream of. Almost all the rides we have taken are by sleigh, and I always take great sleigh walks, but without any cheerful company. And after all, it would have been highly appropriate without the cozy rest that followed in a warm hotel. It would be a much more pleasant and appealing process with my beloved girl. I got a sweet letter from her yesterday. On my return, she asked if I would kiss her, and all I had to answer was, of course. My immodesty can be explained by such a long time away, right? January 16th. Finally, the advance, for which we had been preparing for a long time. Urzhev and Varia, a difficult situation caused by the enemy's deeper breaking in, recently removed. Regular capture of the lost positions is continuing from today, getting closer to our supply bases. A more favorable position has been taken, resulting in a significant reduction in the front line. Construction units are busy here for weeks building new lines and barriers. It looks like materials have been brought there as well. I hope the snowfall does not stop the movement, as congestion in the cold close to the enemy is the worst thing you can think of. The smokestacks at the airfield herald what has begun. The anti-aircraft guns have revealed their disposition to all conspicuously. I ride in the open sidecar of a motorcycle ahead of our columns, most of which start moving around midnight. One of the neighboring divisions was retreating along the road we use. We join a column of trucks at the hill. There are no difficulties. Single trucks still stop and hold up the vehicles following them. The distributor and gasoline pump are off. The tank has auto diesel oil in it. Dark. A long time ago, I should have been at the destination. I am finally getting fed up with it all. The other 15 kilometers I want to walk, so I join a skier I was dragging in tow. At this point, we pass many badly stuck columns and take every opportunity to get ahead. We stumble upon a field kitchen, the running board, and finally, in a sled, we reach the village of Aksanov. We arrive in the village of Bely at about 10:30 p.m. after more than 6 hours of road time. There, all the facilities are full. January 17th. Change of order. We have to relocate to Ilyanskoye, a pathetic village of 7 houses and 1 Soviet stone barrack. The 3rd Battalion holds the line of resistance at Prudny, Toporovo. No one had a good night's sleep. A few hours on a hard bench was all my rest. January 18th, Sunday. Fire! The scream gets us out of a heavy sleep early in the morning at about 5 o'clock. Through cracks in the ceiling, acrid smoke comes through. Dried beams covered in flames are smoldering from the fiery stove. In the hallway, the smoke is suffocating, making my eyes water. With the snow, we try to put out the fire. The snow falls through the beams, without effect. It is still dark. The clock indicates 6 o'clock in the morning. Headquarters and headquarters company relocate to the neighboring village of Gorshkovo. This is the beginning of Sunday morning. My owner is being obnoxious today. There is nothing properly done. Things are often hard for me to keep myself contained. The air is clear, but it is very cold again. All the vehicles we don't need now are sent forward. This way the columns are not as endlessly long. The congestion on the roads will be eliminated. The barrack windows are burning down in the evening. Our ceilings have fallen through, and we are out of a job. January 19th. We quickly dove to Golovino, where I had to prepare the room. Unhappy thoughts were in my mind as I crossed the front line. I saw the tank trenches, the long wire fences. What's all this for? What a pity to leave the area to this filthy, poor nation. In many places the sky was blood red yesterday. Burning villages were set on fire. All this to keep the advancing Reds from getting warm and finding supplies. Greedily tongues of flame devoured filthy huts. War is ruthless. It is us or them. January 20th. The temperature is negative 40 degrees. The temperature dropped to minus 40 degrees. It is hard to tell how frozen my face is. The frost is getting even through my coats and mittens. Our rear guard came back. All of them came back, except for the 2 that were missing. Main part of our division regiments is retreating. There are several frostbitten again. January 21st. Here I go again, ahead of everyone else to the village of Baranovo. This method of preparing apartments is something I like. You get independence for the whole day at least. Difficulties in shifting the troops are barely there. They are all in a hurry to move back. Headquarters company had an opportunity to get a few cows with them. My wish was to keep this precious cargo for myself. January 22nd. I pass through the once drowning in mud stadium, Kvatchevka, with fear and get to the highway. There are many abandoned trucks standing along the road there. They've been standing for weeks, and no one has even tried to remove this property or set it in motion again. What I found in one vehicle was a knapsack and a carbine. That dumb chauffeur deserved to be hanged. Already in many places, communication poles had been blown up and large worthless houses burnt down. The villages that were under heavy fire, I felt sorry for them. There were 8 to 10 houses remained there. It is hard for me to write all that I saw. At night, the frozen battalions arrived. The workhorses of the platoon, as a consequence of bad roads and lack of forage, are completely exhausted. We are in the village of Katarinki. There are few roads cleared of snow, so we have to take a detour. At 4 o'clock, a messenger arrives. There is a message that the battalion still has not arrived at the position planned for it. In this frost, it has been on the road for 12 hours. I go there at once, about 10 kilometers on foot. The road is bad, full of bumps and potholes. I stumble a few times in the dark. I passed the area where there was supposed to be a position. The wire barriers and recently cut down trees make me feel safe. A terrifying cold gets in everywhere. Breath now sits in the form of frost on my balaclava, collar, and cap. And the pocket flashlight turns off. It is already daylight when I come to Sorokino after many hours of walking, and everything, of course, has been fine for a long time. Nothing is working out for us today at all. The motorized transport moves forward not fast enough. I get to the village at the same time as the units, already after having been on foot for some time. The whole village is taken over by other units. What we don't find is a suitable house. January 24th. The temperature was negative 35 degrees. Again, the same story. Immediate building of positions, their improvement. Endless conversations on the phone. Discussions of the important and unimportant. Orders are planned and written. The house is like a dovecote. January 28th. The 10th Company fought off several strong enemy counterattacks during the night. Reports coming in the morning are unclear, so I head to the front line. I can see the silhouettes of the dead in the snow in front of the dugouts. I count 10 of them now. Somewhere else, similar silhouettes are moving around. At a distance of less than 100 meters, a head in blood was torn from the snow and fell powerlessly to the snow. With a simple eye, I can see the uninhibited enemy. I see his outposts, change of posts. I send a few bees to that side. This night, a young Lieutenant Haney had been killed while pushing the retreating enemy out of the spruce forest. On the right flank, the Bolsheviks made an attempt to create a jumble. They were pushed back, however, with heavy losses. Dead men were left on the battlefield. At noon, they were no longer in sight. The wind had covered up the signs of the night's battle. January 29th. The temperature was negative 15 degrees. It is still snowing. Every road and track are covered with snow. The people and horses are getting stuck in the snowdrifts. People sink into the snow up to their waists. January 30th. Temperature, negative 19 degrees. We are taking a new position. New dugouts must be built and communications set up. Through the snow and dense bush, approach paths and roads for supplies are being built. At night, bold sappers have built wire barriers. On January 30th, the Führer made a speech. When he spoke, his words awakened in us confidence in the future summer. More than anything, we were touched by how he dispelled the mistaken belief in the homeland that it was as easy to fight in winter as it was in summer. The Führer explained that everyone on the Eastern Front is strained to the breaking point and that the hardships are terrible. We are kept alive by the belief in our superiority and final victory. This date was celebrated with satisfaction. Spring is nearer and nearer, and in the summer the offensive will continue. The homeland's task is to tirelessly forge weapons for us. Meanwhile, we must hold on in any case. January 31st. While the general situation may be improved, we are not particularly optimistic. We got a cooling shower after the Führer's inspiring speech. With the enemy surrounded near Rzhev, his cavalry units managed to break through further to the highway west of Vyazma. The village of Yakshino, where we have been standing since October 12, 1941, is also significant. A group of paratroopers was sent to the assistance of these cavalrymen. The highway and the railroad are cut by these enemy units. To help remedy the situation, we are forced to send a company of infantry riflemen. The breakthrough near Varia in the south has not yet been completely liquidated. One of their regiments managed to get quite close to the road we used to bring supplies. Because of that, we are forced to release forces and take people off our already weakly defended positions. We cannot think of rotation now, because there are no men. The regiment now has no reserves for the necessary counterstrike. The highway and railroad disruptions have cut off supplies for days. We don't have enough ammunition for the artillery. We are forced to economize. With the help of U-52 planes, a tank formation, hurriedly assembled from parts of several divisions, is supplied with a minimum amount of fuel. Tanks moved forward to strike the Russians from the rear. Very sad that the divisions already engaged in combat were weakened in this way. February 1st, 1942. There has been a blizzard raging for several days already. Huge clouds everywhere, snowdrifts. It is impossible to pass by vehicle or on skis. The only way to get there is by the signposts. Both people and horses are stuck up to their necks in the snow. While on the road, one of our companies covered the distance from the village of Chernigriatsy to the village of Vorobievo for more than 12 hours. They arrived at Gizhatsk only in the next day in the evening at 20 o'clock, exhausted beyond all limits. Unfortunate pigs. February 2nd. Disappointing news. Previously, we have always been able to get our supplies in time and place them in a safe house. It was terrible, but this time we neglected the supplies. Some soldier, during one false alarm, moved the gasoline tank to the stove. The entire house and all the clothes in it were instantly consumed by the fire. How much was lost is not yet known for certain. With everything, I'm afraid my officer's case was burned. All I have is what I am wearing. My uniform, coat, and many other things are now gone altogether. My things, dear as a memory, were also gone. There are no words. February 3rd. On my mission trip, I had the chance to drive through wonderful landscapes, little shaggy horses rushing nimbly, the sleighs run through the sparkling blanket of snow. February 4th. The sun is shining again. I cannot sit in my room. I want to go out. Beautiful weather for flying lured out the rados as well. As if they look like bees, flying out with the first rays of spring in search of flowers. With small groups of 5 or 6 of them, they fly across the sky. And while I am still standing at the edge of the village, watching the Soviet fighter plane dive and hit the streets with machine gun fire, a cracking sound is heard 100 meters away from me, and it repeats once, twice, 3 times. To me, it seems at first to be artillery, but all of a sudden, a single-seat fighter plane flies over my head. Nearby, we found some miserable remnants of dry forage for our horses, and even this paltry supply is already exhausted. There is no hope of a supply from the homeland. The portion of oats is dreadfully small. Instead of 10 pounds of oats a day, the horses get barely 2 pounds. In many places, too, the oats have already gone out. The work is still hard. Our sheds and barns are already open, and we feed the horses with straw from the roofs. Many horses are dying. Unhappy cattle stand in the stables, sniffing the floor and eating their manure. Before long, I think, hunger and weakness will overpower the last horse. The consequences are hard to think about. The subsurface water is very close to the surface in this area. In some of the dugouts, wetness breaks right through the floor. The swamps make the area impassable at times. That is what the locals said. A forest on the edge of which our positions are located is covered with water. Communication is only possible by boat, so our dugouts and shelters must be sunk. Well, the prospect is not a good one. We put some of our ammunition in storage for these reasons, so that when there is no supply, we will not be left without anything. Similarly, we have done the same with food. We still remember the muddy ground of last fall. The food supplies, despite many misunderstandings and big difficulties with logistics, have always arrived, sometimes late, but we don't mind that. Sometimes the bread ration was not enough, especially for a soldier at the front line, without being able to get anything else to add to it. This was the first time during this mission that we also got chocolate along with tobacco. We had a lot of pleasure with the chocolate, and it brought a little variety to our usually monotonous field kitchen. The mail is a painful place in a soldier's life. It happens very often that the most necessary supplies are late, just as the Christmas packages are delayed, and letters go very slowly, despite the fact that the last ones are relatively recent, dated mid-January. In the cities of Orsha and Smolensk, thousands of mailbags are lying at the station. Since January 4th, delivery of packages was canceled. That explains why some of the Christmas presents, which are already in Orsha, were sent back. It was not particularly well for the front as well as for the homeland, especially from a psychological point of view. February 5th. Today I am alone in the house. The commander and Lieutenant Strabel are gone to the front line. I keep watch at the house, sitting at my desk and writing. There is a concert on the radio. The sun shines and warms the soul, but so far that it is low and does not warm the earth. Not long ago, a newspaper published by the 4th Tank Unit, telling the story of the battle near the gates of Moscow. Senior Lieutenant Gunter Kaizen gives a fascinating description of the breakthrough and the movement of the divisions in this breakthrough. This is a historical page of our military glory. Each hero's name could become a fame. The story is interrupted by the order of the General of the 2nd Artillery Corps, to suspend the movement from December 5, 1941, caused by the coming winter. How much more need, suffering, and hardship will befall us? How ferociously we fought in this severe winter, so unusual for us. I remember December 2, 1941. That day, our regiment consisted of 12 officers, 7 non-commissioned officers, and 362 soldiers. While there was a huge reduction of our force due to losses, frostbite, and disease, the regiment bravely carried on its duty and kept fighting. Throughout some time, our lieutenant colonel and I were the only members of the old command in the regiment. Our situation improved a little with the return of some of the sick and lightly wounded. Nevertheless, we are very lacking in reinforcements, especially specialists, machine gunners, radio operators, spotters, and loaders for infantry and anti-tank artillery guns, telephone operators, and sappers. What's more, there is a need for well-trained non-commissioned officers. For us, therefore, it is no longer possible to achieve the same enthusiasm and combat effectiveness as before. Anyway, it takes a great deal of time to carefully train the reinforcements, which, unfortunately, are not trained to the necessary size up to the present time. It is impossible, in my opinion, for our unit to go into new battles. Beside the manpower shortage, there are lacks of necessary harness for the carts, as well as supply trucks. My commander is very hard to work with. I have no power to do anything without his permission on the one hand, but on the other, he requires me to be independent. Grumpy as hell, he goes out of his mind over the smallest detail. When I consider that we all have our nerves strained beyond endurance, that's why we have to hold ourselves back. In addition to this, there is a strange and inexplicable habit of putting young officers in their place on every convenient and inconvenient occasion by the fact that they are younger than him, and therefore their opinions and views do not deserve to be taken into account. It makes this situation unbearable. Ultimately, an officer is something else than a scribe or a recruit. I have recently ordered some books to expand my small library. When circumstances permit, when things change, I will spend more time reading, deepening my knowledge. I will certainly continue my education after the war. Every officer must have fundamental knowledge in all the sciences, not to mention the pedagogical side of the process. The war erases these requirements, which means that after it, you have to work doubly hard on your spiritual development. February 12th. On our section of the front, there are no significant changes. The enemy, except for the shifting fire and reconnaissance units successfully repulsed by us, are not disturbed. Last night's useless walks to the wire barriers. Anxious about our division positioned on the right, they could not stop the Russian breakthrough deep into the rear, quite close to us, and the enemy is constantly bringing up forces. We too now find ourselves in trouble, as we had no choice but to give up our reserves to our neighbors and withdraw our men from the front lines. The engineer companies have been used as infantry for security. I do not think this mayhem could make up for anything. Well, somehow they gathered up the men again. Nothing is going to be done. Patching up these holes all the time is not enough. The artillery fire and bombers would not be sufficient here. Neither assault planes nor artillery will help to improve the situation. February 17, 1942. Fighting the enemy breakthrough in the neighboring division is prepared for several days. Smoke screens, assault aviation, and tanks were used, but these operations did not destroy the enemy. Suddenly appeared T-34s put the successes to nothing. Even snow doesn't hinder these tanks. They move at high speeds, dumping snow with high ramparts, which the enemy uses as cover. The village of Vasilkova was turned by the Reds into their base point. Regardless of all efforts, it is still not possible to take the narrow band of the breakthrough in a tick. The enemy is accumulating more and more forces. Units put into battle for a whole week have been in the open air. As the efforts to cut off the enemy have still failed, my regiment and the reinforced 8th Infantry Regiment must be assembled and make it. This is a mess. The positions are ready for some extent. During Sunday noon, the enemy sent us his lead greeting. The enemy might have observed an escalation of movement. Yesterday, a repeat of the fire at the same time. I was sent to the dugout that was still being built. The strike, this time completely close. Exploding grenades make our men leave the kitchen. When I opened the door of the dugout, I saw flames, rumbling, mud, and smoke. Soldiers all in dust made their way to the dugout. A shell broke through the roof and struck above the door, so that it destroyed the walls of the house. The kitchen ceiling fell through. The soldiers' beds crumbled like a house of cards. There was one soldier standing at the door. He was wounded. He was still lucky. At that time, the commander was in the next room. I haven't felt well for a few days now. I got a lot of headaches. I feel chills. To support myself, I take quinine. The fever stops in the evening. This is where the diary ends. He was killed near Smolensk, in the village of Oshepkovo. We do not know the circumstances of his death. Don't forget to rate the video. Also, write your opinion in the comments. Goodbye, everyone. See you all again.